Hi, welcome to this little run-through mini tutorial for Grid of Points, which is a script that I created for the Monome Norns. It works with grid and with arc, but actually you don't need either of those things to have fun with this script. It also supports MIDI and just friends and a handful of other things that you can look at the documentation if you want to check out. But I wanted to do a little bit of a demo to show sort of what the script does and how it works and how I like to use it in my performances. So when you start up the script to begin with, you get the little instruction screen here, which has all the instructions that you need to use it. This is version 2.15 of the script, which I released recently. And it's, I think, the most interesting version of the script so far. I've been steadily releasing improvements to this ever since I released it almost like 2 years ago or something like that. Originally, it was just a sort of quantized keyboard, but now it does a whole bunch of other things, which hopefully I will be able to show you today. As the introduction says, you get 16 notes along the bottom of the grid, and you get 7 timbres going up the grid. We'll talk about the 8th row in a moment. And full credit to the name of the script to Liz Harris from the band Grouper. Their album Grid of Points, or her album Grid of Points, is one of my favorites. I don't think the script necessarily sounds like that album very much, but I love the name, and it described what I wanted to do, so I am borrowing it. Thank you very much, Liz. When you load up the script to start with, you will get a random root note and a random scale. In this case, we have F1 and the leading whole tone scale, and that sounds a bit like this. So that's nice. As you can see, you've got some lit up rows here. These are the octaves, so you can quite easily jump between octaves like that. And yeah, as I mentioned, the axes along the bottom go up the scale and up the timbre, for want of a better word, and that sounds like this. What you're doing there is crossfading in the engine that I built between sine waves at the bottom and square waves at the top. These are slightly filtered square waves, but you can control that filter. I'll explain how in a little bit. And yeah, you can then start playing. So something like that. And great, yeah, that was version 1 of Grid of Points. That's basically all it did. But I've kind of made some improvements since then. One of the things is different ways in which you can adjust the combination of scale and root note to make it sound more interesting. The scale is easy. You just turn this right knob here and you go through all of the different scales that Norns supports by default. We don't have microtonal scales. That is something that I suppose I could hypothetically add if there's great demand for it. I'd have to figure out how. But yeah, it's pretty simple. So here's your major pentatonic. That sounds nice. You can just kind of mash the keyboard in pentatonic scales and it's always going to sound quite nice. So that's good, but probably more interesting to most people is going to be changing the root note. So this is F1 and F2 and F3 and F4. If you turn this knob here, encoder 1, then you get you jump up in octaves. Sounds a bit sharp at the top, so apologies for the volume. You can even go down. Oop. And it goes all the way down to -2 and +8, which is inaudible to me at least. I don't know, maybe your dog just freaked out when I pressed that. That's how you do that. You can also change chromatically with encoder 2. So if you want C sharp, Locrian, 0, then that sounds like this. Wasn't that lovely? But the point is that you've got kind of a lot of freedom here. One of the things that I like to do, if I go up to a slightly more normal root note, let's say G2, sure, minor pentatonic, then you can also jump up in fifths. So that's nice, and then down in fifths. Like that. And if you kind of go to some wild place and you're kind of like jumping between all of things, then maybe you might think that it's useful to save some presets in which you can return to. And yeah, you can do that. That's what the top row of the grid is for. All you do, if you want to save F#3 diminished half whole for some reason, then you just hold down a key and it lights up like that. And then if you go to some other scale, let's have A2 altered. Whoops. Like that. Then you can just press that key again and you'll go back to diminished half whole. Like that. So that's nice. By default, the top left button comes with C2 minor pentatonic. So you can always return to that very easily. But yeah, you can save whatever scales you want, and if you reload the script, they should be persistent. So there we go. We've got F#3 diminished half whole. If you want to, you can dive into the code and like manually set up in the code your preferred things, but it's honestly easier just to jump into the script and then manually save things. You can also save over things. Like if we wanted C#3 harmonic major, you just hold it, and that should have then saved it over the top. So yeah, we got C#3 harmonic major. You can have a lot of fun with Grid of Points just with this, but there are some other things as well. If you have an ARC or a MIDI controller, all of this stuff is in the parameters menu and you can map it to MIDI. Then you can control some other things too. So let's go back to C2 minor pentatonic for now. Here, this control here will change the volume. I probably need to work on the scaling a bit there. It gets very loud near the top, and it will start to distort. I'm not going to do that to you because that's going to hurt your ears, but please feel free to play with that as you like. The second knob here controls the release. Some lovely Eno vibes like that, which is quite fun. One thing that's probably worth saying is that if you have like every time you press a note, it will take the current status of this. It won't change while something is playing. So if we play a long note, play a low one, and then you hear that first one is still ringing out even though we turned down the release. This third one is the filter. By default it, I can't remember where it defaults to. Let's jump to the parameters and have a quick look. It defaults to a cutoff of 2000 Hertz. And that primarily is going to affect the sound of the top line here. It doesn't have too much effect on the sines at the bottom, but as you turn this down, the sines sound the same. It's hard to say. The sines sound the same, though obviously higher frequencies will get chopped off. But where you really hear it is at the top. Up here, this is kind of sounding very similar to how the sine wave sounds, whereas if you turn up the filter, or even all the way to the top, you can get some quite sharp sounding things there. This final knob we'll come back to in a minute. But yeah, again, you can have a lot of fun with this, but really where I think Grid of Points comes alive is in something that I call magic mode. If you hold down the first key and you press the third key, you see that a little lightning bolt appears here, and already it's starting to generate random notes. I'm going to bump down the volume a little bit so I can talk over this. It will just kind of like generate them pretty consistently, and there's a variety of different ways in which you can play with how these random notes are generated. So probably the most simple way is in this last knob here on the arc. This is the probability that a note will be played. When it's all the way down, you get no notes, and as you slowly increase it, you get a higher chance that on each beat of the metronome, it will play a note. All the way up to 100%. You can, of course, change the metronome and the speed at which notes are generated, so you can sync it to beats or whatever, and I've had a lot of fun doing that with Grid of Points. There you get to a more kind of dance music-y space, whereas this demo sounds a little bit more ambient. If you want to hear maybe a bit of what Grid of Points sounds like in a more beat-oriented kind of place, then have a listen to the album that I posted on Lines a little while ago called June 2025 by Tom Runs Alone, which is a band I have with a couple of my friends. In that, there's Grid of Points all over it, doing stuff with beats. So let's bring down the probability just a little bit. You can, of course, also play with the other things in here, but if you hold down the button on the arc, and if you don't have a button on your arc, you can also press key 1, then you get a series of other controls here. So this first knob here is, in fact, let me bring up the probability to show this, and I'll bring down the volume just a little more. If you hold down K1 and you do this first one, this is clock multiplication. So you can go down to a quarter or a half. So that'll be twice as many as a quarter. This is your standard BPM. Then you've got times 2. And my favorite, times 4. And especially with just kind of playing around with the probability a bit here, you can get some fun things. And then you bring up the release. So you can do some quite cool stuff with that. The second knob is like a random panning. Need to hold it down there. Maybe I'll use this one. This is random panning. To start with, you get a little bit of random panning. You can have everything hard mono, or equally in both stereo speakers, I guess it would be. Or you can set it out really far and get quite a wide stereo spread. What you're doing there is you're setting the maximum of a randomness. Every note is going to be placed randomly in that stereo field, and as you bring it down, the maximum distance it can be sent is changed. This third knob here is the cutoff. The resonance on the filter. So you can bump that up. And you can get that kind of resonancy sound if you want it, or get rid of it entirely. So you just have unresonancy filtering. I don't know what the word is for that. And then finally, on the last knob here, you have jitter. This adds a kind of random offset to the beat when you play with it. So if you have it all the way up, it's not beat synced at all. Whereas if you bring it down, it will be exactly clocked. So that's pretty much it. In the interest of keeping this video short and sweet, I will stop here. I think it's probably worth saying that, yeah, you definitely do not need an arc to play with this script. If you don't have the arc, you just go into the MIDI mapping on the parameters screen, and you can map it to literally any kind of MIDI controller you want to, as long as it's got some kind of sliders or knobs or something like that, then it will work. You don't actually need the grid either. If you unplug your grid, you can still put it into magic mode and just play with the generative. You won't get the visualization of how it looks, and you'll lose the preset functionality, but everything else functions exactly the same. You can have a lot of fun without that. Little icons on the screen. This bottom one is showing that magic mode is active. You can turn it off again by holding key 1 and pressing key 3. This one shows that an arc is connected, and the top one shows that a grid is connected. It also has, if we go down in the parameters menu, switch hands, like various other things that you can control. I didn't mention it, but you can actually change the parameter that the y-axis controls in terms of timbre. And you can't hear that very well from here, but we bring this up. Yeah, you can't hear it very well here, but that's it controlling the filter. You can have it on release, like that. Other things, this is the quantizer. This is got a little off by one, yeah, a little issue there with the probability calculations. I can probably fix that in the next patch. And then, yeah, MIDI here, you can choose the channel number you want to send, the CC, basically, and when you're sending MIDI, then as it sends a note, it will send a different CC for depending on how far up the y-axis you have. You can choose the note length. You can also send just friends. I believe on just friends, the y-axis controls velocity. So the loudest notes are at the top and the quietest at the bottom. And you can also, if you want to, change the arc sensitivity, so how much you get movement based on how much movement you have here. That's it. That's Grid of Points. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, then please ask in the lines thread, and I'll come to it, and I'll try and solve any bugs that anyone brings up. But otherwise, I hope you have a lovely day. I'll get magic mode to see us out.